All right, so we are in Numbers 11. I know that I had in the questions and with the reading material 11 through 15, my thought process was I didn't know how much material we'd make it through in 1 hour. And guess what? Whatever's left over, you guys are ready to go the next time we come back in 2 weeks. So takes that load off of you. Does anybody need questions for tonight? Any printed out ones? Okay.
I'll get it.
Lois does too. Oh, okay. There we go. Ma'am, anybody else? You got it? Okay.
I got extra.
My job, but
Oh, thank you. Okay. Perfect. So yes, real quick, just we're on the same page. We're going to be canceled for the next 2 weeks. We'll be back on January 9th, as far as I know, unless, something unforeseen happens. So, okay, so chapter 11, we start the complaining. These Israelites, we would never do that, right? No, the more I read this, I'm going, oh, geez, I don't want to relate to these people, but I do, dang it. All right, so we've got, the complaining begins. It says, the people soon began to complain to the Lord about their hardships, and when the Lord heard them, his anger blazed against them. All the good things that God has been doing to this nation of people, and they're still humans with a sin nature. They're still going to, they'd only been on their journey for a few days, and the complaining begins. And so we might think that it's strange that a people that's so blessed by God could still complain. But we know that from the text that the grumbling was not just like normal struggles, because there's a difference between normal struggles, like just weaknesses and human weaknesses, like frustrations and things. But then there's a grumbling. That's the word that's used here. And I think from this, it's a contagious murmuring. It's a spreading thing throughout the camp. And it's something that is offensive to God. It says it's an offense to his ears. And so I think that there's more to it than just struggles. I don't know how else to put it, really.
More than just why God?
More than just, this is hard. Just acknowledging that this is hard and that I'm having a hard time with it. Because I can imagine, loading that many people up and carrying everything and traveling through the wilderness, I'm sure that was difficult, and having to set up and following this, the cloud of God's presence whenever it might decide to leave. I'm sure that was all difficult. But there's a difference between just recognizing this is hard and I'm struggling with it versus a murmuring against God, a complaining and a grumbling against God. It's directly against the goodness of God. And I think that's where the heart of it is. And that's what makes this such an issue. And that's why, what does God do? He responds with a blazing fire. To make a note here, the Greek word that's translated complainer means literally one who is discontent with his lot in life. And I think that kind of embodies it. Discontent with his lot in life. And what is their lot? They have God in their very midst. He is leading them directly to a land that's been promised to them that is good and abundant and productive and fruitful. And they're discontent with their lot in life. And that's kind of where it's at. So let's take a look at question 1. Okay, so the first complaint is about misfortunes. Compare the Lord's response to what the people say and the Lord's response to what Moses says to God. Meaning, what the people are saying, which is their complaining and their grumbling, versus what does Moses do? He prayed to the Lord. And there's a huge difference there, right? God responds to the people's, their heart of discontent and grumbling and direct denial of God's goodness with this blazing fire. But then Moses, we have this intercessor that comes in, and he is interceding, he's praying on behalf of the people who don't deserve any kind of mercy whatsoever. But God responds to that by alleviating the punishment. Yes. I thought of Philippians, the verse in Philippians 2 that tells us to do all things without complaining or grumbling. I know we've all heard that one. Probably had it quoted to us when we were children. At least I did. Do all things without complaining or grumbling, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God, without blemish, in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. And the more that I think about that, the more that I see the roots of that verse that Paul wrote. The roots of that are here in the Old Testament. Do everything without grumbling and complaining. Why? Because you are to be different than the world around you. The world around you is crooked and twisted, and it's dark, and you are meant to be blameless and innocent. You're meant to be without blemish. You're meant to be shining lights in the world. And that's exactly what Israel was called to do, wasn't it? They were a people group that was set apart to be different from the peoples around them. They're not being so different now, though. Okay. Then we have in verses 4 to 6 the second complaint, which is a lack of meat. All these poor Israelites. It says the foreign rabble who were traveling with the Israelites began to crave the good things of Egypt, and the people of Israel also began to complain. Oh, for some meat, they exclaimed. Now the rabble here that complained about the lack of meat was the mixed multitude that left Egypt with the Israelites. So there would have been possibly Egyptians who were just like, well, that looks pretty good. Let's go do that too. Let's go follow them. Their God's pretty great. There could have been some other nationalities that were also servants and slaves at that time. And so I think that it did tell us back in Exodus that a mixed multitude left with the Israelites. But it's interesting, and it's also kind of confusing that they whined and complained about the lack of meat, considering, first of all, they have a God who meets their every single need. He has done nothing but meet their needs ever since they stepped foot out of Egypt. But also, he also once provided meat for them back with the manna. So wouldn't it just make sense to think, oh, he can do that. He can do that again, wouldn't he? That was back in Exodus 16. But isn't that what our sin nature does, though? It acts like blinders that make us completely oblivious to everything that is just shouting God's goodness. And our sin nature just hones in on the things that we want, that we shouldn't have maybe. Because what are they wanting? They're wanting, the good things from Egypt. All of that good things from Egypt, what was that tied to? Their slavery. And they're completely oblivious to all of the horrible things that were in Egypt, and they're only thinking about the good things. It's really interesting. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I always think that they start the complaining and it doesn't even occur to them to just ask.
Yes.
And I think now, do we do that too? I don't know to what extent, but every time they've asked God for something, he's given it. So why wouldn't you start there?
Yeah.
But they always start with, well, are you tired of the food too? Because I'm tired of it. And I don't know if that's just human nature, but God always supplied. So it's like, why wouldn't, you just wonder if Moses is the only one that knows how to pray in this group.
Yeah.
Because no one else seems to.
Yeah. And Joshua, it seems like, who was very close to Moses, so it would make sense. But yeah, you don't hear of many other people who were, even as we'll see, Miriam and Aaron, not doing the great job there. So yeah, it does kind of, I don't know if that's just us coming from the perspective of being able to look back and see this, and maybe we're blind to our own situations, I don't know, but yeah, it makes me wonder as well, why wouldn't they've had an entire year of God providing for them, left and right. Why is this the starting point? So why do we complain? That's an interesting question. When we are coming up to hardships and things that are just we're struggling with, why is it that we respond with complaining? Not what are we complaining about, but what is it that is causing us, that's the response. Did the question make sense? Okay.
I think we always want more than what, you just want more. You see other people have more and
Or you remember something,
Yeah.
yes.
it's
Yeah.
in us or something.
Yes.
Not that we shouldn't control it, but
Right. But it is natural, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah. I like that. I want more.
I think, like you said, our sinful nature, it's just constantly to want things that we shouldn't necessarily have, or they're not on track with God, or the sin makes you feel bad about your wants maybe, and you turn away from God, and so you still have those wants, so you're like, I don't know, are you ashamed of telling God those things? Like, I know sometimes when I pray, I feel guilty, like, oh, I shouldn't ask for this, I have so much already, like, you know, so I don't know if that's where that comes from, I don't know.
Could be, yeah. You don't think about asking him for it because you don't, there's something in you that is telling you maybe you shouldn't.
That, yeah, or that you don't need it,
deserve
or,
it, you don't need it,
those are,
yeah. Yeah.
Or just being frustrated with things that are completely out of your control.
Yeah.
And then you have to step back and try and figure out how to get things better under control.
So it comes down to a trust issue as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that's exactly what they were going through at the, for lack of a better term, like at the mercy of their God who is just moving them who knows where, day by day, you know, could be overnight he decides to move, could be, you know, a month he stays, you know, like it's just on a whim almost. Yeah, I'm sure that that's exactly what they were feeling as well.
I think we complain because we hate discomfort, so, just,
So true.
well, and it goes along with having to pack up and move and just, they don't,
Yeah.
we want it easy, we just want it easy, and then we just complain when it's,
Yes. Somewhere in this, we think we deserve easy. Not sure why.
Yeah.
Somewhere in us, we're thinking, you know, when we finally do get arrested, I deserve this, you know? Or I don't know, yeah, trying to make something a little more convenient for ourselves, even if it's a selfish way of going about it. There's something in us that thinks that
We are selfish.
We are.
We're kind of built that way. It's
Yeah.
something you have to,
that default setting
Yeah.
for humans. Yep, I completely agree.
When society makes it worse, convenience is the biggest word,
Mm.
and like, that's all we care about,
Yeah.
is convenience.
Yep. I think there's something too about, like in this specific situation, the grumbling and the complaining wasn't just inward, it was spreading. And I think there's something to that feeling of being validated, that someone feels the same way that you do. You know, and I mean, I'm guilty of this. I'll go, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened to me. I got cut off in traffic, blah, 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 blah. And then all I want is someone else to go, oh, that's terrible. Oh, I hate when people do that. That's all I want. I'm not looking for you to fix it. I'm not looking for, you know, a solution. All I want is for you to go, oh, I hate that too. I think there's something that is just this validating feeling when we, you know, when people can complain together.
misery loves company.
That's right, that's exactly right. So if nothing good comes of complaining, then nothing good comes of complaining, what are we missing out on when we do complain? Missing out on peace is at least one of the things, right? The
And
peace.
appreciating what you do have.
Yeah, gratefulness, yeah, absolutely. And if I'm complaining, and I'm probably trying to fix it my own way, along with the complaining, then I'm missing out on God's provision as well. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to question 2. It says the second complaint is about meat. The Hebrew word for craving is tavah. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Meaning a strong desire for something pleasant, but perhaps, though not always, sinful. It can mean positive and proper desires, but it's an especially fitting word for improper lust. So what does this word tell us about Israel's cravings?
To me, it indicated that it was sinful,
Mm-hmm.
which, you know, asking for meat you wouldn't think would be sinful, but
Right.
the way that's presented, if God is providing and would provide, and they weren't happy with that,
Mm-hmm. And I think
it was a hard question.
I-
read that.
I think you hit it on the head, though. They're not happy with it, meaning there's nothing wrong with the manna that God's providing them. It doesn't, it's not, they're not malnourished or anything. It's simply I'm not happy with it. I think you hit it on
You're
the
not
head.
thankful.
Right, right, for the provisions that God did have for them, right?
Because they
We
were
don't
probably
recognize
still
it.
not working for the manna, they still just had to go pick it up.
Yes and no. So they do have to go pick it up, but then they have to grind it into like a flour, and there's still the preparations of
Yeah.
making it into a cake
Well, that would be
with anything.
anything.
Right. But no, I mean, it's just right outside their camp. They don't have to go hunt it, you know? They don't have to go and grow crops or something. It's just right there, yeah.
So it's like greed and laziness, or greed and entitlement that they're
Mm.
experiencing, maybe, like, we deserve something more, or what, or the influence from the other people too, that's the other thing, like,
Right.
the world influence, or the cultural influence of, oh, it was so much better in Egypt, it was free in Egypt, whatever those, the rabble people were saying,
Yes.
and influencing them.
Yes. Yeah, you're totally right. So I'll note something that in Hebrew, and it says, let me find it real quick. It's when they're being super dramatic. Let's see. I think it's in verse 6. My translation's different. The Bible translation I brought is different from what I have in my notes, but it says, but now our appetites are gone, and day after day we have nothing to eat but this manna. Oh, it's so dramatic. But when I was doing my notes, the translation I used said, our strength is dried up. But the true translation of it in Hebrew is, our soul is dried up.
That's what mine says.
Does it? Okay, I like that. I like that better. It just means, I think that it truly is just pointing at the fact that it's not a lack of nutrition. It's truly that they are losing their appetites for manna. They're just like, nope. No, I want something better. I want something different. And it's a discontent with God's goodness. That's exactly what it is.
Well, we look in our refrigerator and say there's nothing to eat.
Yeah. Or into our wardrobe, there's nothing to wear.
We're not satisfied with what's there.
Yeah, you're so right.
That's how I related to that. Was,
Yeah.
or showed kids, look in the refrigerator. There's nothing to eat here.
Unless you have to cook it, and then who wants to do that?
Clearly, they didn't want to either.
They didn't want to either, from the sounds of it.
I didn't want to boil the manna and do all that work.
Right? But it just kind of cracked me up. Okay, when it comes to the vegetables and the fruits and stuff, I get it. When they were like, oh, there was cucumbers and melons and everything. That sounds actually pretty nice. I get it. The meat, though, you still have to go out and, like, catch it, kill it, prepare it, cook it, all that kind of stuff. So I don't think they knew what they were asking for.
But we tire of the same thing.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. A year of that kind of makes sense.
I mean, not just food-wise, we tire
Oh, I see.
of the same.
Mm.
I tire
Mm.
of
Don't
sameness.
think you're alone there. God has you in a place for, you know, a period of time and doesn't feel like there's anything going on. Is that what you're talking about? You just kind of feel like you're stuck in the
Sameness.
same.
I mean, a sameness, that, the same in the food, the same in, everything's just the same. Come on.
Day
Let's have
in,
some,
day out.
Same clothes.
yeah, let's have some action. Let's,
Same Sam.
Same scenery, same
Adventure
scenery.
in you. I would be fine with it, like that. You're the adventurer. I'd be fine with this.
Same weather, same.
I don't know. I want to say yes, but I also think that there was a lot of activity. A lot happened recently up to this. It's only when they started traveling that things went way, way south for them. So I think and maybe
well,
they
that
were,
would be sameness too.
Yeah.
that would be, you're
I mean,
right.
Sameness of pack up,
Yeah, yeah. Day
routine,
in, yeah.
routine,
Yeah,
adding more.
yes, true, true. That would get tiring. Moses comes in with more laws, Moses comes in with more laws. That would get tiring. But I suppose we don't live in that type of society, so I don't know if that's just reading it with Western eyes kind of thing, I don't know.
Yeah.
That is hard to interpret that. All right, so verses 10 to 23, poor Moses, he's cracking under pressure here. We can take a look at question 3 here. Back at Sinai, Moses was overwhelmed with his judicial role for all the people. He then enlisted elders from each tribe to delegate authority in judging the people according to the wisdom in God's law. Here is a similar overwhelming moment for Moses, who has continued to be the only teacher for Israel. So what do the emotional words in Moses' prayer say about the state of his heart?
Well, I took it that he thought God was maybe upset at him,
Oh, what made you think that?
because he's so miserable, he keeps asking God, you know, have I not found favor in your sight?
Oh, yes.
What have I done? Have I conceived all this people? Doesn't he just say, you know, if I screwed up, let me die?
Yeah.
I think is he punishing him
Mm.
for sin?
So,
Mm-hmm.
totally frustrated, but it sounded like he didn't really understand why God put him in that spot, so I
Mm-hmm.
thought maybe that's what he was. It says Moses was displeased, but
I think you're onto something there, Marilee. You're right. The language is very much almost like he thinks God's against him now, because I gotta find it, which I shouldn't bring this translation with me because it doesn't always have the wording.
11, verse 11.
Yeah, and the other translation that I was reading, it said something about favor. Your favor is
Mhm.
against me. Is that in anybody's?
Yeah, wherefore have I not found favor in your sight?
Right, and he's talked about favor before, in the tentative meeting. You know, he's saying if I have found favor in your sight, then let your presence be with us always, and that kind of thing. And so now he's kind of using that same language, but it's different now. He's saying, what happened to the favor? Why are you treating me this way? So I think you're onto something there. So that means that he is acknowledging that God allowed this to happen, that this is something that God allowed to happen. So why does God allow those types of things to happen then? Why is God allowing this to happen to Moses?
I think that's what he was asking. I think Moses thinks because Moses thinks God's upset at him, and that's why the people are complaining.
Okay.
Almost like, what did I do to displease you, and now,
This is the consequence.
yeah, now they're complaining about meat, they're complaining about this, they're complaining about that.
Got it.
No wonder he wanted to die.
That
He
is,
just felt like he was at the end of his rope there, but he doesn't know what he did wrong, from what I can gather. What did anybody else think on that? You all got answers written on there?
I just put he was weary and defeated.
That was
Yeah,
the word I
well,
thought
that's-
too.
there it is in a nutshell, right there.
Like he needs help, he's asking God for help because he can't do it by himself, like acknowledging that he needs God at every step of the way.
yeah, I think he feels alone in,
Yeah.
in all of the burdens that he's taking on. I think he feels alone in it, for sure.
And
Sounds like
there's
you
been
guys.
other people in the Bible that have thought God deserted them,
Mhm.
and we can feel that at times, obviously.
Well, the Psalms are filled with that.
Mm.
David just is like, you know, feels like that. There's another part in that section of what Moses is saying where, let's see if I can find it in my notes. It says, in verse 15, Moses says, if you treat me like this, kill me at once. And there's the, you know, I'd rather die. But then he says, if I find favor in your sight, that I may not see my wretchedness. What do you guys think that means, that I may not see my wretchedness? I understand the whole, like, if this is gonna continue, just kill me now. But what does he mean by that I might not see my wretchedness?
Mine just says ruin rather than righteousness.
Okay,
He just doesn't want to fail.
okay.
What word is it?
Ruin, R-U-I-N.
That he won't be ruined, brought to ruin.
Don't let it get that far. Is that what that would mean?
Let people down.
I think that's kind of where I was thinking, and I wanted to see where your guys' thoughts was, but I almost read it as like, if this is gonna continue, this is truly your plan for how things are going, at some point, I'm gonna crack and I'm gonna yield to this. I can't handle it, and he knows that he's only, he's just as much sinful human as anybody else, just as much, you know, capable of yielding to sin as anyone else. And so I think that he is in all of this complaint for like, I'm struggling, I can't handle it, woe is me kind of thing. He still has this desire to honor God's name. He does not want to, like you said, fail God. And, or at least that's how I'm reading it, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think that it's almost like, I don't want to do anything that's gonna dishonor your name.
Take me now.
Yeah. Yep. Because it's only a matter of time. I don't know, what do you guys think? Do you think that that's,
Makes a lot of sense.
it made me think of that, is it a saying? I hear it, where it says, God only gives us as much as we can handle. Anybody else heard that one?
That's not true.
No,
It's
I
not.
agree. I agree. It's a finicky question because, it's almost, how do I put this? If you answer, no, he does not give us more than we can handle, then it makes it sound like we're the hero of the story, that we do it on our own strength. And if you say, yes, God gives us more than we can handle, then it paints him in a horrible light, in a way.
Like he's
But-
someone ruling God that it puts a heavy burden on him.
Right, just for funsies, you know, like, it's a really difficult question, so I feel, I don't know, what do you guys think about?
I think it gives you more than you can handle, so that you have to go to him. Otherwise, you're always gonna handle it.
Gives
You're
us
gonna handle it.
So we grow.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Teaches us dependence on him for everything. So I think the answer is, he gives us more than we can handle so that we don't handle everything ourselves, but I have to figure out
I
how
think he doesn't give us more than he can handle.
Ah.
There it is.
There's
to.
the.
Trade spots with me.
That's right, mic drop.
Yep, I agree.
I mean, that answers it all. That wraps it up.
Yep, totally does. It totally
Wow.
does.
I mean, put that on a t-shirt.
I'll be printing those out for you guys.
I need an extra large, please.
Coffee mugs, keychains, the whole works.
And make this into a cottage industry.
I'll let you do that.
Do a merch drop. Yeah, that's great. Oh my goodness. All right. And so we see the solution that God gives to Moses because he's handling it, right? So he appoints 70 elders. Is that correct? 70 elders? Yeah. To aid Moses in teaching the people, and the elders were there to help Moses carry the spiritual load, to help him care for and minister to the people, and to be a support for him in the ministry. What can we learn from God's solution for Moses?
I think he can help, God uses other people to help us too, like, he's other people as his tools, I guess, if that makes sense, yeah. So you can turn to others for help. God is using them as well as he uses us.
Yeah. Sometimes we know it, sometimes we don't know it. Yeah, I think you're right. Do you know what it kind of made me think of? Moses is crying out, and he's feeling like he's just sinking under this burden of this unruly people, and probably hearkening back to the burning bush, where he's like, "No, send anybody but me." And it kind of made me think, and then God, gives him grace through this solution with the 70 elders to alleviate some of this burden from Moses. And it made me think of Peter and Jesus when Jesus is walking on the water and Peter is walking toward him, but then he takes his eyes off of Jesus and he starts sinking. And that's kind of the picture that I had as Moses is sinking, and then God gives him a lifeline there. Okay, here's another question I had for you guys. So we've got the complaining of the Israelites, and clearly God's unhappy response with their complaining. What do you guys think of Moses? Do you think he was complaining? Do you think this prayer was complaining? There's no right or wrong answer. I'm simply just asking what your thoughts were on
The
this.
prayer in like 10 to 15?
Yes, correct.
I would say yes, but he's coming to God for an answer, so God doesn't say we can't complain to him or talk to him, but he's not saying like, I don't know, I guess his expectations are his heart is in a better place than the Israelites who thought that they just deserved more and weren't even gonna ask God for it.
Right. Yeah, Moses isn't,
He's coming to God as, I don't know, respectfully and still wanting to keep his name respectful, his heart is that he cares about his relationship with God and he's asking for help for God. I don't know, it's more reverent, I guess. I don't know if that's a better way of putting it.
yeah, no, I agree. I think that's, the wording is tricky.
Yeah, and his heart is not just to complain because he's,
Right.
whatever the definition you used. I can't remember.
Discontent with his
Discontent,
lot in
yeah,
life, yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
more so please help me
Right.
follow your plan, or I don't know.
Right. Well, first of all, he came to God because he knew God could do something about it versus the people who were just grumbling amongst themselves. So I think that's a huge.
Just to complain.
Yeah, right, yes. What does everybody else think?
Well, when he puts himself in the equation, what have I done? You know, why are you displeased with me? And we've all done that prayer. Something's happened. It's like, did I do something to cause this? Or is this a punishment or a trial or fill in the blank?
Right.
But like you said, the people, they just start complaining. And, I mean, it says Moses was displeased with the people, but again, he didn't say, okay, God, you did this, you did that.
Right,
It's like, what have I done?
right.
Tell me. I
Right.
think he's coming with an open heart, like she said. His heart was to get an answer for why it was happening.
And he's recognizing his own sinful nature, that he's capable of having committed something,
Right.
like you said, where, you know, God's not happy with him. And the people weren't even factoring that at all.
Yeah, they didn't seem to care about poor Moses,
Nope,
their leader.
poor Moses. Okay, so then, let's take a look at how God responded to the people, verses 31 to 35. Now the Lord sent a wind that brought quail from the sea and let them fall into the camp and all around it, for many miles in every direction from the camp. There were quail flying about 3 feet above the ground. So the people went out and caught quail all that day and throughout the night and all the next day too. And no one gathered less than 50 bushels. They spread the quail out all over the camp. But while they were still eating the meat, the anger of the Lord blazed against the people, and he caused a severe plague to break out among them. So that place was called Kibroth Hattava, the graves of craving, because they buried the people there who had craved meat from Egypt. And from there, the Israelites traveled to Hazeroth, where they stayed for some time. So, and let me bring up real quick. I had another song. This is from Psalm 78, verses 27 to 31, and it says, "He rained down meat as thick as dust, birds as plentiful as the sands along the seashore. He caused the birds to fall within their camp and all around their tents. The people ate their fill. He gave them what they wanted. But before they finished eating this food they had craved, while the meat was yet in their mouths, the anger of God arose against them, and he killed their strongest men. He struck down the finest of Israel's young men." That's 31, okay. So that's just a psalm that kind of talks about that as well. So what do you guys think about, we have this, I'm gonna call it a dual nature. I don't really know how else to describe it, but a dual nature of God's response. First, he gives them what they want. Then he sends a plague on them. What do you guys think about that? Interesting, kind of two sides of the same response.
Well, it doesn't seem fair, and yet we know it's God, and he is fair, so I can't really suss it out.
Right. I know, it's a hard one to,
So is there consequences to what we ask for if it's not directed in the right way?
I agree. I totally agree. I think that he gave them their, the desires of their heart, and that even though it was foolish desires, right? And it was wrong desires, gave them over to those desires. And then, in a way, this is a more direct way of showing it, but there was consequences that went along with that. Sometimes it doesn't always seem as direct, you know, but I think that this just kind of points to when God gives you over to your foolish desires, there's a consequence that's linked with it. And so it seems like I can get what I want, but then there's something that's kind of tagging along on the backside of it, maybe. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think there've been times I've insisted to God, and maybe that's the difference, instead of saying, oh, God, I want this, God, I need this, God, whatever many ways we come to God, instead saying, no, God, I'm drawing the line. It needs to be this or nothing. It must be this. I insist. And I think sometimes God has said, okay, all right.
He's
And-
smarter than we are.
And it doesn't just,
We
He
forget
knows
that.
the
Why do we forget that?
doesn't just leave me in it, but I have a path to take because of it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You can't undo that.
Okay, Sarah. I'd advise against it.
Yep.
But you have free will.
Yeah.
Free and strong.
Isn't that just a woman trait?
It makes you wanna pray, like, if it be your will, God.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
maybe that is a less complaining nature when you're, so a way to ask for something without being complaining, and truly wanting that with your heart, wanting your heart to align with what God wants to.
Yeah.
So knowing that if it doesn't happen, then that's not his will.
And sometimes that has seemed, it doesn't seem that, I agree with that now, but sometimes that has seemed to me to be a way to just be able to let God off the hook for something that I'm asking for, if it be your will. Or I would hear people pray that way, and I think, I'm not sure it's been a while since I thought that, but it seemed like maybe a cliche sometimes, and a crock, perhaps. And I don't think it is now.
I think if you really truly don't think that, you say those things, absolutely, it could be, because it'd be easy to say,
Just,
yeah, and not really feel that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
It's easy to not have your heart in
Yeah.
that one, when you're just trying to keep that
Yeah,
control.
like I really want this, so it's your will.
you heard me say it, right,
Yeah.
God?
I said it again.
So,
I
you're
can
safe.
I can restate it a few more ways if you want me to.
As long as I'm safe.
As long as I say that one
Yeah,
thing.
as long
but-
as
yeah,
your
but I don't
will
want any
sticks within
consequences.
this.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
so-
yeah. Yes, that's where like your heart wouldn't really be in line, yeah, you're not willing to take the risk of the bad part for that, yeah. Yeah, that's true, I could see why you'd think that.
But are you asking for material things?
Oh, I just mean in general, like when
Or
you're saying
the
prayers,
health
you know,
of
like
somebody,
please let,
or
exactly,
watch
not
over
material
my
things.
family,
Correct,
please.
I don't think I ever pray for, no, yeah, it's more so like so-and-so's cancer to be, in remission or whatever, yes, things like that, like people's health, that sort of thing. Yeah, which obviously is a good thing, and most people would want that, but is that part of?
Probably more like health and safety, things that are generally outside of our control.
Exactly,
on the
yes, that's what I
day-to-day.
mean, yeah, no, not material, no, I don't, no.
Yeah.
I want a red sweater for Christmas.
Yeah, please, if it's your will.
Treating him like
No.
Santa now, huh?
Lose 20 pounds.
Yeah,
without
yeah.
If it be your will.
And I know it is.
I know this is a part of your plan.
Yes.
this group. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Give me some good ideas for prayers, guys. Thanks.
That's sweater.
I know what not to say.
You mean prayers for us?
Yeah.
We need all the prayers you
Yeah.
can get.
Whew, it's gonna take a long time to pray for y'all tonight. All right, we can, let's see what time is it? Oh, we're good. Okay, we can do chapter 12. It's a short chapter, so. We have our third complaint. It's against Moses himself. In verse 1, we have Miriam and Aaron complaining about Moses's Cushite wife. Does anybody's translation say anything other than Cushite? I'm curious.
And it says Cushite.
Okay. We're not really sure who this woman is. Some think that maybe Zipporah died and Moses took a new life. Some think that Moses took a second wife when Zipporah returned to her father's house. Maybe because a Cushite woman would have been an Ethiopian woman, it might be a derogatory term towards Zipporah if she had a darker skin. Either way, there was some sort of complaint about this woman. However, I think that verse 2 is most likely the real reason for complaining about Moses. I think verse 1 was like the segue of complaining and against him. You know, oh, that Moses with his Cushite wife, and then, oh, you know, but really, you know, and then they really get into the meat of it, which is them saying, has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he spoken through us too? There's the meat of it right there. The accusation, the way I'm reading it, and tell me if you think differently, the way I'm reading it is that the accusation is this idea that Moses has presented himself as the only spokesperson of Israel, that he's the top dog. No one else gets to talk with God. No one else, God doesn't use anyone else, you know, the way that, you know, I don't know. I think that that's the idea of it. Possibly. I don't know. Do you guys think so? Okay. Sometimes I wonder if I'm like reading a message into it, because it's hard to know exactly what they were thinking when they said that. But what's absurd is that Moses didn't even want the job. So that's kind of hilarious. But also, God did speak to people through. He spoke to the Israelites and to Pharaoh through Aaron, right? Miriam is considered a prophetess, and she had that whole song, that beautiful song in Exodus, which was inspired by God. So these two have nothing here to complain about. Just in the last chapter, God, if you want to call it, ordained those 70 elders by putting his spirit on them, and they prophesied in the spirit. Clearly, God's using other people to speak through them. However, there is a difference between Moses and everyone else. He did appoint Moses as like the foremost leader. And Moses has this much closer and deeper relationship with God than anyone else. And we can see in the next verse 3, why. He's an incredibly humble man. You don't get close to God without a good, keeping, generous dose of humility in there, or at least not the way that Moses did, you know. And anybody else, when you read verse 3, kind of chuckle to yourself and go, I'm not very, very humble if you're talking about yourself as a humble person, because Moses is the one that wrote this. How humble could he really be if he's like, and Moses was a very humble person.
But I'll put it in parentheses.
Yeah.
Mine says more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth.
Oh, man.
That says more than any person.
Yeah.
Really driving it home.
Very dramatic. I don't know if Moses actually wrote that or not, but some people have thought that there could have been an addition after he died, because clearly someone had to add on the account of Moses' death. He didn't do that from beyond the grave. So it's possible someone to be like Joshua, who was very close to him and would have known the true nature of Moses. It's possible that he went through and edited. Who knows? But I just kind of had to chuckle at that a little bit. Think back to when Moses started out as the prince of Egypt. He was very confident and very assured of his own strength and wits and smarts, and now we've got a man who has been tested in the wilderness. He's been tested in so many different ways, and extremely tested by this unruly people that he's been, put in charge of. And I think that that's all brought him to this point of humility. I think that does a lot. I don't know if I've said this before, but the wilderness is kind of, it correlates to a time of testing. Anytime you see the wilderness, like Jesus fasting in the wilderness for 40 days, that kind of thing, it kind of correlates to testing and trials. And so I think that kind of makes a lot of sense, really. And then we have in verses 4 to 9, God's dramatic answer to Miriam and Aaron. And God took a personal interest in this. I think it's interesting because I don't know if Miriam and Aaron were saying this out loud to people, or if they were just kind of doing their own thing. I don't really know. It doesn't tell us, but God called them out immediately. And he took a personal interest in this, and I think that that's really interesting. We can go to question 4. Okay, the third complaint is about Moses himself. Even Miriam and Aaron complain about Moses' leadership, but God defends his exclusive appointment of Moses. What does the Lord identify as unique in his relationship with Moses, which is different from that of any other prophet? And how does this foreshadow the uniqueness of Christ? And I apologize, I had 3 other references to go along with Acts, and I forgot to put them in there. So we can read them really fast, so maybe it makes a little more sense to you. I don't know. Maybe not. Hebrews 3, 1-6. Does somebody want to get John 1:1? Do I have a volunteer? I'm going to call a name out here soon. Sarah, thank you for joining.
I haven't found it yet, but
It's only one verse. John 1:1.
I'd be happy to if I can find it.
I can do Hebrews if I can find it. And then, Lindsay, will you do Philippians 2:6?
Yeah.
I can just find Hebrews. That
John
would be
1:1.
great. If you found it, go for it.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Thank you. Do you have yours?
Yeah, Philippians 2:6.
Yes, that's right.
Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to.
And then Hebrews 3, 1-6. And so, dear brothers and sisters who belong to God and are bound for heaven, think about this Jesus, whom we declare to be God's messenger and high priest. For he was faithful to God who appointed him, just as Moses served faithfully and was entrusted with God's entire house. But Jesus deserves far more glory than Moses, just as a person who builds a fine house deserves more praise than the house itself. For every house has a builder, but God is the one who made everything. Moses was certainly faithful in God's house, but only as a servant. His work was an illustration of the truths that God would later reveal. But Christ, the faithful Son, was in charge of the entire household, and we are God's household if we keep up our courage and remain confident in the hope in Christ. Okay, so we can read that question again. What does the Lord identify as unique in his relationship with Moses, which is different from that of any other prophet? And how does this foreshadow the uniqueness of Christ?
Well, I took that verse 7, or 7 and 8, where it just said he would speak to him face to face, that it wouldn't be he's been doing that all along.
He has, but that's different from any other prophet.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
giving clear instructions, not foreshadows or,
Right.
I think it's in riddles, I don't know.
Visions.
Riddles,
yeah.
visions,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, anything that needs to be interpreted, really,
Yeah.
you know? So then how does that point to Christ then?
Well, Jesus did speak for God the Father. It's the only thing I could think of. I mean, he is God, but he was also
Right,
God's representative. He was God's mouthpiece.
yes, absolutely. And, where is it that says, oh, Moses himself prophesies at the end that God will raise up a prophet like me. And that was Jesus. So he does fulfill, and like in Hebrews 3, where it's talking about how Christ is greater than Moses, and I'll read verses 5 and 6 again, just because I think that it kind of clarifies this. Moses was certainly faithful in God's house, but only as a servant. His work was an illustration of the truths that God would later reveal. But Christ, the faithful Son, was in charge of the entire household, and we are God's household. So I think that the point is, Moses was kind of setting up this template, I guess, is kind of the only word that kind of comes to mind on this. And then Jesus came along and he was greater in everything that Moses did. Moses saw God's form and he heard God's voice, but Jesus was God, and his word was God's word. So he comes along and he's greater than Moses. I guess that's the point of it. Does that make sense? Okay, we can move on. In verses 10 to 12, we have God's punishment for the accusation against Moses, and I think that this criticism of Moses, it's not that Moses was beyond criticism, that he is perfect in everything. That's not the point. But Miriam and Aaron should have been afraid to speak against Moses. He is God's appointed, leader. And not only that, but their criticism is pretty petty and incredibly prideful, honestly. So we've got God's punishment to Miriam, and it's that her skin becomes white as snow with leprosy. So what do you guys think about Miriam becoming a leper, God causing this to happen? Why leprosy? Of all the things that God could have done as a punishment, why leprosy? I guess that's my question to you.
You can't miss it.
Truth. Because what
And
happens?
Others can't miss it either.
You're
Right.
outcasted and you're dirty.
You're unclean. Yep. So what's on the inside, in her heart, is now plain as day on the outside of her, right? Yes. I think that's exactly what it is. But here's the other question I had. Why was Miriam affected and not Aaron? They both complained. I could be wrong on this because I don't know for certain. But I wonder if it has to do with who Aaron is. Because who is he? He's the high priest. And he is to represent not just the people to God, but God to the people. He has this incredible calling, this high stature, this responsibility to represent the glory and the beauty of God. And kind of hard to do that if you're covered in leprosy. So it's not that he's without sin. Clearly, he's not without sin. But I wonder if it just has to do with who he is as the high priest. I don't know. What do you guys think on that? I don't know.
Well, Aaron doesn't say it until he's already seen Miriam. Oh Lord, I beg you, do not account this sin to us.
Mm-hmm. So he does recognize that he's guilty as well.
Yeah, and maybe don't do to me what you did to her. Which we've acted foolishly. Whoa, whoa. Ooh, I'm getting,
I want no part of that.
I'm getting it, God, and
Message received.
we were foolish.
Yeah.
We were foolish.
Yeah. Isn't that the point where we start going, oh, thine will, thine will? Okay, we can finish up the chapter here. Verse 13 are Moses' first and only words in this entire chapter, and they're a prayer for his accusers. What does that sound like? That to me, that sounds like Jesus saying, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And then verses 14 to 16 shows God's justice and his grace. Miriam is shut out of the camp, living as a leper for 7 days, and this is appropriate because Miriam had done something even more shameful. It says, than her own father spitting in her face. This is even more shameful. She tried to bring down a leader of God's people with petty, false, and self-interested criticism. But she's restored then, and she's brought back into the camp, and they can move again. So we see there still needs to be a consequence for that. God is directing you back to his grace, back to his goodness, and to his love, and to a relationship with him, a covenant with him through that period of time of being outside of the camp. That's what he was doing for Miriam. But there's always grace at the end of it. So any other questions? That's gonna close up chapter 12 for us. And we can just pick right back up in chapter 13 when we come back in January. That's kind of crazy to think about. I know, in the new year, 2024, which I will be writing 2023 for like the first 2 weeks, probably 3 weeks, something like that. Yeah, every time. The worst is on checks. Because then you're like, oh, dang, script. Any other questions?
You still write checks?
Every now and then. No, not often, no.
Okay.
But it makes me extra annoyed when I do.
Yeah.
All right, we can go ahead and close with prayer then. Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for your word to us, and that it just speaks volumes of your goodness and your grace and your mercy, but it also speaks volumes of your holiness and your desire that we also be holy as you are holy. So Lord, guide us in that, direct us in that. Be with us as we are amongst other people, amongst family members and friends during this holiday season, that our speech is always pleasing to you and it reflects your goodness. And we are just shining lights, just as you mean for us to be in this dark and twisted world. So be with us, Lord, and we thank you for the wonderful gift of your Son. And so we pray this in your holy name. Amen. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.